Good morning. Welcome to AccessibleSTL, Creating an Inclusive Culture. I'm Christy Herzing. I am your Community Access Coordinator for Paraquad, and we are very excited that you've chosen to join us this morning for the very first AccessibleSTL breakfast and for what I know is going to be a very lively panel discussion. So first, before we begin, I want to call your attention to one thing. You have folders sitting in front of you, and they have a lot of really great information both on the AccessibleSTL program as well as Paraquad, but it also has your evaluation for today's program. So if you wouldn't mind at the end of the program taking a second to fill that out and leave it at your tables, it would be very helpful to us. I know you guys have probably heard this before, but your feedback for us is really, really important because this is going to be what helps us to generate future programs to make sure we're meeting your needs and answering your questions. So now, to get us started today, I would like to introduce our Paraquad's Executive Director and CEO, Amy Waymeyer, who's going to tell you a little bit more about Paraquad.
Good morning. Thank you, Christy. Wow, what a great crowd. Thank you for everyone for being here. Welcome to AccessibleSTL, Creating an Inclusive Culture. As many of you know, our mission is to empower people with disabilities to increase their independence through choice and opportunity. We are the disability experts, and our knowledgeable staff, they help us make St. Louis an accessible community on a daily basis by working with people with disabilities, businesses, and local organizations to create a fully integrated community. The panelists beside me will share today their efforts and best practices at creating an inclusive culture within their workplace. We are honored to have representatives from Ameren, the City of Clayton, Monsanto, MTM, VSA Missouri, and Wells Fargo Advisors. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. I hope that all of you enjoy our program, and I'm going to let Christy tell you a little bit more about AccessibleSTL. Thanks so much.
Okay, so the AccessibleSTL program. The AccessibleSTL program has a wealth of services for local organizations, businesses, and government entities. You may wonder, how can one program work with all these different types of entities? Well, the answer to that question is actually really, really simple. The AccessibleSTL program is customized to the needs of each of its participating organizations. So we work one-on-one with different organizations to determine what needs they have. We provide services such as ADA site surveys, which means we will go into your facility. We will do an evaluation of your facility looking at restrooms, parking spots, to determine if it's compliant, where it's compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. But then we will provide recommendations to you on how you can make your facility completely ADA compliant. We also provide training and education through this program on disability awareness, hiring people with disabilities. One of our most recent trainings has been on interviewing. What can you say? What kind of approach will a hiring manager want to take when they are interviewing a person with a disability? And all of these trainings and all of the services that we do are meant to kind of put people at ease, give them the awareness and the knowledge to move forward in creating an inclusive culture. We also provide policy development and review. So for example, if your company doesn't have a formalized reasonable accommodation policy, we can come in and we will provide best practices and strategies, not only on how to create that policy, but also how to implement that policy. The last piece, which I believe is the backbone of the AccessibleSTL program, we are providing resources and technical assistance to make sure that all of your questions get answered and make sure that everyone's needs are met. Essentially, our job at AccessibleSTL is to make your job of creating an inclusive culture for employees, customers, and residents a little bit easier. So now that you know a little bit more about the AccessibleSTL program, let's get into our panel discussion today. Our panelists will be sharing best practices, strategies, and what's worked for their organization in creating an inclusive culture. On a side note, each of the organizations represented here today have something in common. Think about that during the discussion, and I promise I will tell you what it is at the conclusion of the program. For right now, let me introduce our moderator for this morning, Kathy Brown, Paraquad's Director of Public Policy and Advocacy, who will tell you a little bit more about our panel and take us through the rest of the program.
I started those applause for me. Welcome everyone. As Christy said, I'm Kathy Brown. Thank you Christy and Amy for the introduction and orientation to this morning's program. I'm going to introduce our panelists to you. We're going to go through some questions, and then if time allows, depending on the brevity of our panelists, we'll allow you to ask questions. So please make note of anything you would like clarification on, or any aspects of accessibility and inclusivity that weren't covered during the program, because you may have an opportunity to ask questions. And so I'll start by introducing our guests, and just to keep them on their toes, I'm not going in consecutive order. So first we have Scott Held, who is Ameren's Manager of Building Services. Ameren is dedicated to making a difference for employees and customers with disabilities. Most recently, Ameren has worked with Paraquad in an effort to make their company's headquarters physically accessible for employees with disabilities. So welcome, Scott. The City of Clayton has shown its dedication to ensuring that everyone has access to businesses by incorporating ADA upgrades to improvements made on all city-owned facilities. The city has invested in textured curb ramps, crosswalks, audible crossing signs, barrier-free bus stops, and much, much more. Dale Howdeshell, Clayton's Director of Public Works, joins us on the panel today. And joining us from Monsanto is Jennifer Shesley, Monsanto's Global Human Resources Compliance Officer. Monsanto has a winning culture of innovation. Monsanto puts a strong emphasis on its team members and creating a culture which provides support to ensure that employees' accessibility needs are met. Welcome, Jennifer. MTM is a healthcare transportation and management company that partners with clients to develop innovative solutions for accessing healthcare, increasing independence, and connecting community resources. MTM strives to create a culture of inclusion, not only for customers, but employees as well. Carrie Shuey, Vice President of Administration, joins us today. Carrie, thank you. VSA is the state's fine arts organization supporting artists with disabilities to do and share their work in the community. VSA, which stands for Vision, Strength, Access, supports artists with disabilities in Missouri by providing opportunities for professional development, education, and working to ensure that all cultural institutions in our area are working to be both physically and attitudinally accessible. Gina Alvarez, VSA's Executive Director, is with us today. Gina, welcome. And finally, please welcome Emily Shoemaker, Vice President of Clearing Strategy Solutions at Wells Fargo Advisors and Chair of the Diverse Abilities Team Member Network, and the panelist with the longest running title today. Welcome, Emily. Wells Fargo Advisors understands the value of all team members and appreciates the unique capabilities and contributions that they bring to the organization. That's why the company is focused on diversity and creating an inclusive work environment. For the fourth consecutive year, Wells Fargo Advisors' parent company, Wells Fargo, was named by Career and the Disabled magazine as a top 50 employer. So please give a warm welcome to our panelists this morning. Okay, I'll start firing off the questions to our panelists. One of the many ways that companies are developing inclusive culture for employees with disabilities is by creating an accessible environment in the workplace. Ameren recently started a project to increase physical accessibility on its St. Louis campus. So Scott, can you explain a little bit about how Ameren identified the need for increased accessibility?
Yes. Can you guys hear me? So I've been in facilities for about 10 years now, and the first thing you think about is lighting, hot and cold calls, and then we have some resource groups at Ameren that started out with the acronym of ANDE, A-N-D-E, which stands for Ameren Network of Disabled Employees, and then that resource group then changed their name to DAWN, Disability in the Workplace Network. And then since then, they wanted to focus on a more people-first approach, so now the resource group is called Powering Connection for All Abilities. So we met with members of this team, and they talked about things that employees of Ameren had noticed that we could improve upon. So we started talking about where they have to park. Our parking lot's on a slope, and we had our van accessible spots at the top of the hill, not the bottom. Our lobby access had all stairs, so you had to check in, go back out a door, go around the corner to a ramp, and go up the ramp. Restrooms, some of the doors had more than 5 pounds per foot for pressure, so we had to push buttons to open some doors. And those are just a few things that we did based on our employee recommendations. So we met with some members of the team and also members of our diversity department, and they introduced us to Paraquad and talked about the ability for Paraquad to come in and do a full building assessment. We have 3 different buildings that were all built in different years, and they're combined together, so it's one complex of like 800,000 square feet. But each 3 different buildings, none of those had really an accessible restroom. So Paraquad came in and gave us a very comprehensive plan and did a compliance study. They spent a few days there. It was 103 degrees, and they were out in our parking lot measuring. My window was out, and I felt so sorry for them, but they did a great job, and they really opened our eyes to what really we can do to make our facility accessible for all people. So without their professionalism and their experience of actually going through our facility, I can't thank them more. I have a list now. I'm developing budget numbers, and we plan to make our facility as accessible as possible.
Thank you, Scott. That's wonderful, and we're so grateful for all the changes that are being made at that physical plant. Next question is that many cities around the nation realize the need to provide greater access for people with disabilities. What has the City of Clayton done to improve access for people with disabilities to city facilities, infrastructure, and services, Dale?
Well, first of all, the city, in conjunction with other communities, hired an ADA coordinator, and they sought assistance in reviewing the city facilities for potential accessibility enhancements, including such things as inexpensively as simply adjusting door closures to the right pressure. As mentioned earlier, the city's upgraded bus stops and a number of curb ramps and crosswalks in the downtown area and on arterials. The crosswalks have brick pavers with concrete banding on the sides, and the domes on the ramps have a very durable material that should last quite a while. Recently, we completed an ADA self-assessment and transition plan that will help guide us in hitting the areas that will make the most impact quickly. Last summer, our senior project manager, who's in the audience now ready to help another community, went on a white cane walk to better understand the potential obstacles facing some of our pedestrians in the downtown. He came back quite psyched from that, and I think he learned quite a bit. Over the next 3 years, the city has a number of street projects that were authorized by a bond issue last April, and when we complete those, we should have addressed about 75 to 80% of our curb ramps in the city. We also, as mentioned, have installed audible signal crossings and ensured that all the push buttons are fully accessible to those at those intersections, not just to the proper height, but able to roll up to them and reach them. We're also removing a number of obstacles in the pedestrian access routes, such as old light poles and things like that that were put in the middle of sidewalks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think 2 great examples of how little changes can really open the doors for people with disabilities in a building, in a city, in a community. So thank you so much for sharing that. Jennifer, HR stuff. Many managers will admit that they're unfamiliar with strategies and best practices for interviewing and hiring people with disabilities. What resources is Monsanto providing managers when interviewing and hiring new employees with disabilities?
Well, first, thank you for having all of us. And Paraquad has been a great partner of Monsanto's over the years and during this journey. So thank you for allowing us to participate in this. And I would say we take a look at it and step back even before talking to our managers. It's really laying the foundation, what we refer to as organizational readiness. And it starts within HR. Even our HR professionals can benefit from having regular conversations and trainings on the topic, because we need to arm those who we consider the managers and HR to be frontline responders to any situation that comes up. So we really stopped and paused and said, let's not assume that everyone in our HR community even knows how to handle some of these situations. So we started with day-long sessions with our HR partners throughout the organization, arming them with the tools and resources that they need to address any of the questions that employees or hiring managers or people leaders might have throughout the course of the process. And in that case, with that, then we can then say we've armed our people with the tools and resources that they need. Also part of that human resources training was really a day-long intensive workshop for our recruiters, putting them through real-life situations in the interview process, starting from the moment that a candidate touches our website from an accessibility perspective, all the way through the application process, the phone screen process, any in-person interviews, and really walking them through real-life scenarios and putting them on the spot kind of to give them in-the-moment experiences so that if they made a mistake in that moment, we could talk them through it and coach them through that. And then it's really looking at our hiring managers. We're starting to, and this is an ongoing journey, so I can't say we've perfected it yet, but we are launching training for all of our people leaders to give them the resources. This is going to be a long journey in terms of getting to all of our people leaders, but preparing some training for them to give them tools and resources, including we started the first of its kind, and one of my colleagues is here, Alejandra, who was instrumental in helping this happen. We have started a process of engaging in mock interview sessions on campus where we bring individuals with disabilities to campus and put them through an interview process using our interview guide questions, our behavioral interview prep, and putting them through exactly what an interview would look like. So, and we have our hiring managers, our real hiring managers, go through the exercise so that it's a two-way street where we are hoping that we are providing real-time feedback for individuals who are in the job search process, giving them feedback real time, but at the same time our hiring managers are given feedback in the moment in terms of what they could do differently or better, or how they can engage with individuals with disabilities. And then finally, I would say that we are launching, we haven't launched it yet, but we're getting ready to launch a toolkit for all of our hiring managers on how to engage in conversations related to requests for accommodations, as well as how to manage conversations when an applicant or an employee discloses that they may need an accommodation. So providing, again, as many resources and tools as possible for our hiring managers.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Employment is a huge issue for people with disabilities, and I think that when organizations don't know what they don't know, there might accidentally be barriers that keep people with disabilities from gaining employment and then contributing to the success of your organization. So your leadership there is phenomenal. So thank you for starting that journey with us. Now let's talk about customers, winning business, and money. According to the National Disability Institute, people with disabilities have $220 billion of discretionary income, proving just why it's so important to create an inclusive culture for all customers as well. MTM has an ongoing commitment to provide excellent customer service to people with disabilities. Carrie, can you tell us about MTM's approach to customer service and how it's improved your business?
So in MTM, we service our clients by removing community barriers to increase access to healthcare and to promote independence. So with our call centers, we provide extra customer service by offering the programs of TTY and TDD, so that if people have a speech or a hearing impairment, there is not going to be a communication breakdown when they call our locations or our call centers to establish transportation. The other area we focus on is our mode of transportation. So when a client calls in to schedule a trip to a healthcare provider or facility, we make sure that we understand that if they need any accommodations. We use the medical provider care plan or the feedback that we get from the medical care provider to really assess what is the best mode of transportation for them. We want to ensure that they have a reliable and a safe experience with us. We take that a step further, so any transportation provider that we use, we make sure that they go through a comprehensive training program. We can't assume that they know how to assist people in and out of the vehicle, so we want to make sure that they know how to do that they know how to assist them through their path of travel to get inside to their care facility and then back to the vehicle. And then in addition, if they use a medical device, that we're able to secure them and provide a safe ride for them to and from their healthcare appointments. Lastly, we have a program that we're very proud of. It's our travel training program. And in this program, we assist people in the community, in urban communities especially, that are near or have access to a public transit system. And they can use that system, but yet maybe they just need a little help to get started. So with that, we work with them to use the public transit system to learn how to use it, from purchasing a ticket or a pass to actually getting on, whether it's a bus or a rail system, so that they can navigate the needs that they have with their life, meaning going to the grocery store, getting to and from work, and really promoting independence for themselves. And that's a phenomenal program that we do around the country.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's wonderful. Gina, I think you would agree St. Louis has some of the finest cultural institutions in the nation, certainly in the region. When we think of cultural institutions, disability is usually not the first thing that comes to mind. Recently, there have been efforts to ensure that cultural institutions are more accessible. So Gina, can you talk to us about how VSA Missouri is working with cultural institutions in the St. Louis area to create an inclusive environment for people with disabilities?
Yes. Well, first of all, I just want to say that VSA believes that the arts are a catalyst for social change. And because we have so many prominent and wonderful cultural institutions in St. Louis, that social change, I think, has the potential of being very widespread and very strong. So we have partners in this initiative. It's a new initiative. We're working with the Missouri Arts Council, which is the statewide funder for the arts in the state of Missouri, as well as AccessibleSTL and VSA Missouri. And what we're doing is creating a cultural access convening that meets on a quarterly basis. We invite everyone we could possibly invite that's working within the cultural institution realm. Many of these organizations are extremely visible and prominent within the region or in the city. And what happens is we create kind of a think tank environment for people to come to the table, to share best practices, to discuss kind of the hard-hitting questions that maybe are uncomfortable. We have a safe environment to ask those questions. We also invite presenters to come to the meetings. We've had from ADA law and from the regional ADA, the regional ADA coordinator has come to talk to our convening. We've had individuals who are creating task force on the board level of their institutions to share with how they're creating an inclusive and diverse environment within their organizations. We've also had special interest groups with special projects come and present to the cultural convening. And I think what's happening is we find these pockets where people are doing really amazing work, but you don't necessarily know that this work is happening. So it's an environment for people to share what they know, how they do it, and also ask the questions that they need to ask. As I said, it meets on a quarterly basis. We've just begun, so it's a new initiative for us. And we're excited about where it's going to go and the continued conversation that we'll be having about access within the cultural institutions. So that is.
Thank you, Gina, for helping to make sure that everybody can access the art scene of their choice. That's wonderful. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about employee resource groups. These are groups of employees who join together in their workplace based on shared characteristics or life experiences. So Emily, if you'll talk a little bit about how the incorporation of employee resource groups assists in creating an inclusive culture for people with disabilities at Wells Fargo Advisors.
So Team Member Networks is our employee resource group. They are heavily ingrained in the full enterprise goals. So as a chair of a Team Member Network, we have 3 main goals. Team member outcomes, which is focusing on recruiting, retaining, and developing the team members that we have in our organization. We have marketplace outcomes. We participate in Wells Fargo's goals with understanding how to better serve our community that have various demographics within the diverse segments. And then also advocacy, making sure that our team members are active in the community, representing Wells Fargo, but also representing the passion and commitment towards our individual communities across the United States. For the Diverse Abilities Team Member Network in St. Louis, we did several events. One was partnering with St. Louis University's Ability Institute. That was started out as a project that focused on universities or education abilities. We partnered with them to be able to make that exhibit mobile and able to go out within the community for corporate America. They did that this last year at Wells Fargo Advisors in St. Louis, and it was a huge success. Team members had a greater understanding of really what is considered a disability. You had obvious disabilities and those that perhaps are not quite so visible. Also understanding that the technologies and the services that could be available. So when I think about our Team Member Network's goals, team member outcomes is really important for me. I'm a manager. I want to make sure that my employees feel engaged and have a feeling of inclusiveness, that they're not afraid to self-disclose that they need some assistance, that they're believe that as a manager, I'm there to help them be their best at work every day. So the team member networks are part of my regular quarterly discussions with my employees. We talk about, so what are the team member networks within Wells Fargo Advisors that's available for them? I ask them if they're a member, if they want to join one, or if they've even just attended an event across campus that could have been sponsored by another team member, in order to better understand the cultural differences, how they do their work, and understand each individual's story so that they can better bring an inclusive environment within Wells Fargo Advisors.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful. So speaking of inclusive cultures, Scott, you talked a little bit earlier about how Ameren identified the need to increase physical accessibility. So can you talk to us about how you think those efforts help make an inclusive culture for people with disabilities?
Sure. So when I think about the culture, I think about we have like 1,800 employees and consultants that work in our facility, and they have the ability at any time to reserve one of our 164 conference rooms. So you never know who's going to be coming into your facility and what needs they may have. And I feel like what we're doing and what we've identified to be done allows anybody that comes into our facility to feel like they're just like everybody else. They can access everything they need. They can go to the cafeteria and reach the condiments. They can go to any restroom on no matter what floor they're in. They can go to any conference room and not have to have any help at all, because they should feel just like I do. And that's really the culture I want to see at Ameren, all across our 188 facilities, but we have to start with the main one first. So it's really a goal of mine. I have a deaf sister, and she's older than I am, and I understand that disability, but until I started meeting with these resource groups in our HR department. And then, we partner with HR because it gives us the ability to hire and retain any person with any ability. So I'm proud to be a part of this as we grow and hopefully get our facility where anybody can access everything.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate you making the connection between physical accessibility and then the culture that you want to create there. I think that's a very important aspect. So after hearing about all the great things the City of Clayton is doing, Dale, why is it important for people with disabilities, its residents, its businesses? Why is the accessibility of the City of Clayton important?
Well, very simply, we are striving to make our community not just a major place of employment, but a desirable place after work. Having an inclusive environment is a key to the increasing the vitality of our community. Whether you live, work, or play, or just visiting our community, we want you to have full access to our businesses and our amenities. Thank you.
Thank you, wonderful. So Jennifer, more on HR. Many people with disabilities are not comfortable when disclosing a disability or asking for reasonable accommodation at work. How is Monsanto creating a culture of inclusion to ensure that employees feel comfortable when disclosing a disability?
Again, it comes back to what we refer to as creating that inclusive environment and the organizational readiness and preparing everybody. But it really starts from the top with the commitment of our senior leaders at our company. And it's really embedded into our business strategy. So our overall diversity and inclusion strategy, I hesitate to even say strategy. It's really about the way we do business. It's not an add-on. It's not a program. We weave it into everything we do in business. And it's all about creating a great place to work for everyone. And it starts with that culture where every employee feels valued regardless of the different aspects, background, dimensions that they bring into the workplace, and making every employee feel comfortable bringing their whole self to work and feeling comfortable being who they are in the workplace. So it really starts at the top. We have a CEO council that focuses on diversity and inclusion, as well as a team devoted to it. And we have a strategy around called I Am, which is inclusion at Monsanto. And it's I Am Monsanto. So we have a lot of branding around that, especially around inclusive environment for individuals with disabilities. So when we think about all of our business resource networks as similar to Wells Fargo, we have 9. One of them is the Access Network, which supports employees with disabilities or employees who support family members with disabilities. And it's really, all of our networks are open to all of our employees. So anybody who has any interest in any of the topics can join any of our networks. And we really partner heavily with our Access Network to make sure that we're providing resources and materials and experiences for our entire workplace so that people do feel comfortable and do feel as if they can bring their whole self to work. So our Access Network has been a really critical part of this journey for us, starting even a few years ago, even broadening it beyond, it's not just about abilities, it's how do we make this a topic that is relevant to all of us, because it is relevant to all of us. And even we had Mike Houlihan with Homes Without Limits come to campus to talk about, as we continue to have an aging workforce, how that impacts us on a daily basis and how we can prepare ourselves outside. So providing resources beyond just what's in the workplace. When you start talking about it broadly with your employee population, not just about how it impacts their work environment, then they start to feel as if work is also part of their home culture. We partner with Access and other networks to provide lunch and learns throughout our campus on various topics related to abilities. So we've had topics on items such as or awareness around invisible disabilities, so not those that are obvious to all of us when we first look, and managing through that. We've also provided some lunch and learns on just how to foster inclusion and how to make people feel comfortable with the topic. I would say that another thing that I mentioned earlier is that toolkit is really going to do a lot for us in terms of making employees, it will be a toolkit both for hiring managers, but for employees as well, that gives them a step-by-step kind of guide on what are the things you need to consider before you even think about wanting to disclose. Let's walk them through things that they need to consider and how to manage conversations, because we are not saying that everybody has to disclose, but we want to give them the option to disclose if they feel, and creating the environment where they feel comfortable. And additionally, that communication strategy I mentioned, kind of the I Am Monsanto, recently we started doing some feature articles about employees throughout Monsanto, and we have featured individuals with disabilities, employees with disabilities who are willing to share their story about what a great culture Monsanto has been for them, because our employees are the most powerful messengers of our story. Their experiences are going to be the one that we can talk all we want about how inclusive we are, but until our employees feel comfortable sharing their stories, we're not going to make a lot of progress.
Thank you, Jennifer. I love the way you're infusing that into everything to impact the culture as opposed to an add-on, like you said. I'm sure it makes a world of difference. Wonderful. So Carrie, training and education for staff and managers can be the best solution to create an inclusive work culture. So why does MTM believe it's important to provide training to staff in areas such as disability awareness and etiquette when conducting an interview or talking about reasonable accommodations?
So MTM, just a tiny bit of history, we have had a lot of growth over the last 2 years, and in that growth we've expanded across the country in several locations, and we were hiring a lot of employees. And as we worked to remove barriers out in the community for our clients, we started asking ourselves, are we making sure that we're removing barriers within our own organization? And are we really creating an inclusive culture for our employees? We are very proud of our culture, and we strive to have a very robust culture within our organization, but are we doing what we need to for all employees? So we recently, and this is new for us, we recently partnered with Paraquad to do disability awareness training and interview training. And Christy came on site and led that for us, for our hiring managers, our HR team. And it was, I think it was eye-opening for us, because while we think that we are doing what we should be doing, saying the right things, we don't realize that maybe we're not, and we don't realize that maybe we are saying something that somebody else is finding offensive, not by intention, but just that we don't know, that we didn't have that awareness, or we aren't fully educating our hiring managers and ourselves on what to say, how to conduct an interview, and that starts from the minute that our HR team is connecting with that individual, and even prior to that. But and it's just been a couple months that we've really started down this path. But kind of piggybacking off of what Jennifer said too, it's really starting with HR, and our HR team is very hands-on with the hiring and recruiting process, but we can't be across the country in every location. We do have some staff on sites, but we have to rely on our hiring managers as they go through some of those final stages in the interview process. They're the ones out there communicating and talking with the employees, and they're the ones that are managing them on a day-to-day basis. And we have to give them the tools that enables them to do it the right way, and to make sure that they are promoting an inclusive culture within the organization. And those of you who are coming from HR, there's things that I get surprised by every single day. And it's not even sometimes related to a person with a disability, that I still can't believe that was said maybe by a manager to an employee. And so I think that we have to, as an organization and as a culture, really prepare our employees to create an inclusive culture and to do the right thing.
Thanks, Carrie. I'm sure your managers feel much more comfortable going into a scenario armed with the knowledge and tools to relate to people in the way that they should.
I think it was a moment of self-reflection. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. So Gina, why is it important for cultural institutions in the St. Louis area to provide equal access for patrons with disabilities?
Well, the cultural institutions are on the front line of the public, right? Everybody wants to go to the museum, the zoo, the symphony. So for that reason, it's important to create an environment of inclusion, and I think a deep understanding of what diversity really means. So, you know, we want everybody to walk into, you know, a museum and feel comfortable, and to feel like we can participate as you know, your neighbor does, as the person that is there with you. So I really think that the cultural institutions have an opportunity to really go beyond the necessary or reasonable accommodation, and put forth really dynamic programming that serves universally. And I think that the cultural institutions would benefit a great deal by expanding how the public interacts with the arts, with performances. I think that to change the model, you know, of walking into a museum and not being able to touch the work, or not being able to get close to the work, for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, would be really exciting. So, and also with new technology, with 3D printers, there's a real opportunity to take advantage of I think a really dynamic and innovative way for everybody to experience these cultural gems that we live with on a daily basis. So I think it's a missed opportunity for the cultural institutions. It's also audience building on a very simple, fundamental level. They're concerned with their numbers, always getting people through the door. So if the cultural institutions broaden their scope, then they broaden their audience. So it's a win-win situation.
Thank you, Gina. Absolutely. Emily, you talked about employee resource groups and some other strategies. Can you tell us what other efforts Wells Fargo advisors have made to provide a really inclusive culture?
Sure. So it was interesting when I researched this, I actually saw a quote, so excuse me, I'm going to read it. It's from our 1888 handbook for team members, and it stated that it was important for team members to show proper respect must be shown to all. Let them be men, women, or children, rich or poor, white or black. Let it not be forgotten that the company is dependent on these same people for its business. So Wells Fargo has really kind of always had a lens on diversity and understanding that is a significant marketplace and makes us successful as a company. But it is something that requires work, and it can't be just assumed it's happening. So the organization recently, as of I think she started in March, hired Kathy Martinez. She was the former Assistant U.S. Secretary of the Disability Employment Policy in the Department of Labor. So she has been hired to make sure that our strategy is front and center and that we are addressing the disability segment from a marketplace and then also internally from team members. We have to, again, similar to Monsanto, it really is from the top down. We're making sure that we're walking the walk, talking the talk, but also from an employee resource group, making sure that we're getting that message across the entire organization and recognizing areas where we could improve. So there's a lot of activity going on. It's ingrained again in all of our annual goals. We have a new website called Team Moments, where again, similar to Monsanto, we're focusing on the stories of our team members and understanding how they address their daily work in their community, and being able to give a spotlight to team members that have various diverse abilities.
Thank you, Emily. Policy geeks like myself get really excited when we hear that Kathy Martinez has been scooped up by such a phenomenal organization, and we know that she'll just really bolster all
Yes.
the wonderful things that you guys are doing. So that's wonderful. Thank you. We've come to our final question. I'm going to allow each panelist to respond to it, and then we do have some time, so we can take 3 or 4 questions from the audience. So I hope you've been thinking of ways to stump the panelists. We can call it that if you want, stump the panelists. So final question, and we'll just start with Scott, and we'll move on down the line. Based on your experience, what approach would you recommend for an organization just starting the process of creating a more inclusive culture for people with disabilities?
I think the first thing is to realize that if you don't have a certain disability and you think you can walk around your entire facility and understand what you need to do, you're kidding yourself. So I've been in the facility group for 10 years, and what Paraquad identified when they came in and did their evaluation was just an eye-opener. And so I just, I'm honored that they came and we made the decision in our resource group and our diversity department teamed us up with Paraquad, because it really, and like I said, it humbled me, because I've learned a lot about how to be a better person just through Paraquad also, but also make my facility open for everybody. And I can't be thankful enough, and I would recommend, if it's not Paraquad, somebody, but Paraquad did a great job of just opening our eyes to a lot of areas that we just were overlooking.
Thank you, Scott.
I would say partner with Paraquad. We've done this recently in the last 60 days and 90 days, and it's been, as Scott said, just an eye-opener for us, a great resource, a good partnership. And we started with a site accessibility survey. We did, Christy and her team did a tour on our facility, really looking at the paths of travel, the restrooms, just in our food service areas, just being able to make sure that everyone can access what they need in our facilities, and then going through the interview training, looking at our job descriptions, making sure that we have the right accommodations policy, and it was just a fabulous resource for us.
I would say don't be afraid to start. I mean, sometimes we can be paralyzed with the enormity of a task, and don't be afraid to pick somewhere and start. For us at Monsanto, similarly to my colleagues up here, is we did start with the site accessibility assessment. We brought in an organization to do that to help us, and it helped us identify some barriers, which some of them were obvious, such as our recruitment process and our HR offices we're in a building that we're not the most accessible. You have to go through the kitchen and the cafeteria to get into the building, so we invested a lot of resources into developing an accessible entrance to the main entrance of that building and an easier way for individuals to access the building. But then we also brought Paraquad in and partnered with Paraquad and asked them to take a look at we have several tours on our campus for both employees and customers to make sure that they were accessible on all of our campuses, to ensure that anybody could partake in those tours. I would say it's really important to really look at what the needs of your organization are. This is definitely not a one-size-fits-all process. And so you really need to tailor it to what the needs of your organization are. And most importantly, utilize the amazing resources in our community. We have some great resources to assist with this effort, especially Paraquad, who can help, and don't be afraid to ask for that help. And the other thing that I've learned on this journey, and in the diversity and inclusion journey as a whole, is all of us in this endeavor are striving for kind of the same end result, right? So that everybody feels welcome and included. Don't be afraid to ask one another for help. We are all willing to talk through, because we're all on a daily basis facing new challenges, and we want to help one another, whether it's for our own organization or other organizations. So make sure you reach out to anybody who's in this line of work, because I know every single one of us is willing to have conversations and provide resources, or don't do it this way because we did it this way and it failed. I mean, we need to learn from each other's mistakes and each other's best practices as well.
Yeah, I think you have to start by educating your staff, the decision makers, and the holders of the purse strings, so as to be able to change the culture of your organization. You have to change the culture. It's not just getting some education. You have to live it on a daily basis, so you have to make a culture of change. And if you don't have the support of the financial decision makers and your staff that's going to implement change on a daily basis, you're probably not going to succeed. And has been pointed out a couple of times, Christy said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. So ask someone that does, get help. There are many people that, such as Paraquad, that are interested in helping you. So don't be afraid to seek that help.
Thanks, Dale.
So a lot of the same similar thoughts, but trying to think of something additional to add is, one, remember that change takes time, that it is a financial investment that you're not going to be able to say has an ROI of 2 or 3 years. Expect that it's going to take time to see the benefits financially across an organization. So when you're going to get the purse strings open, that there really is, it takes time, and be okay that it takes time. Engage to get a lot of different strategies, and then also engage in those conversations internally. That it requires us to be aware of our own perceptions and our own perceived limitations, then own that you have that, and then change that behavior. So you have to first recognize that you as a hiring manager or an employee may have a perception that someone is incapable of doing something, and you have to acknowledge that someone has that, and then be able to work on changing that perception. And education takes a big part of it. Having those courageous conversations with your team members, your employees, and your management is critical.
Gina?
I love the idea of courageous conversations. I think in regards to the arts, what I would say is that there's, in terms of accessibility, it's in tandem with facility and program. So I would encourage people to look beyond the ramp and remember that you're presenting programs to a wide variety of people and make sure that everybody can participate. And I find that extremely exciting, and that's where the innovation comes in, and that's where I think the cultural institutions have a responsibility to the visitors and the patrons. So.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you everyone for your wonderful perspectives on these issues. We do have some time remaining, so I'd like to open it up to the audience. If anybody has questions for the panelists, I'll come to you. Make yourself known. Did I see?
Hi. A lot of the things that you have addressed talked about physical disabilities and making things accessible. Can you talk about anything that you've done or any expertise or ideas that you have for people with psychiatric disabilities or learning disabilities and those kinds of problems?
And we'll let whichever panelist wants to take that question spontaneously respond.
Someone that has an invisible disability. So for me, it's an important topic when I'm engaging our team members. So being able to understand the support that's available within our organization, being able to know that there is an accessibility management team that addresses not just the physical accessibility, but perhaps you may not be able to assemble a sentence really well, but are able to speak very clearly, and having the management have the understanding of, so their emails may not be in perfect form. So what can we do to assist that? It is part of what I think is that awareness of understanding the different disabilities that are out there. And that's one thing that the St. Louis Abilities exhibit. We also have resource fairs for our team members so they can understand the level of support that's out within the community. We've also had a significant amount of requests from team members to have our team member network address caregivers and parents of children that have disabilities in order to kind of have programming around how do I financially plan to perpetually care for my child, how to handle the daily stress that I have and yet still be able to come to work, or are there times where I'm allowed to have a variable work schedule in order to be able to accommodate certain needs either that I personally have or that I have because of someone that I'm taking care of. So it's important to educate managers, the people that are out there in the front line that are managing those team members that have that. My team member network partners often with the veterans group, which often has a lot of stress-related disabilities.
Thank you, Emily, for that perspective. Any other panelists want to share anything about their work with diverse disabilities?
I would echo everything that was just said. I would also say that, again, it comes back to communicating to the employee population or any population you have the resources that are available, because all of our resources are available regardless of the type of ability or disability that we're speaking of. We even took a look at things like in our kind of our emergency evacuation procedures, the strobe lights that go off during those evacuations, the impact that might have on an individual with an anxiety disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, and how are we, is this really the most appropriate way? Is this the only way we can go about? So it's really pushing boundaries and challenging people to think beyond just those physical, visible disabilities, and engaging in those courageous conversations, especially with our people leaders, in terms of thinking broadly about, you may be talking to someone who does have an invisible disability, and being aware of that in every engagement that you have. So a lot of the training and education.
And Gina, I thought I saw you wanting to kick in.
So VSA is we do a number of things, and one of my favorite aspects of the job is working with artists one-on-one, and we work with artists living with a wide variety of disabilities. So we don't deal with any one kind of disability, but what we do is we deal with the artist first. So that's the mentality that we have and that we share throughout the state of Missouri through exhibitions and programming. We bring artists to different cities within Missouri, to universities, to colleges, to cultural institutions, and we showcase their talents. We employ them. We're an arts organization, so we don't have a lot of money, but we do provide, a small, stipend for their abilities, or for their, for sharing their work. But I think for us, the primary school of thought is that we work with artists and artists first. So
Thank you. Audience members with questions? Yes?
Good morning, Alejandro Cornejo with Monsanto. My question was, are any of your organizations leveraging a mentorship program for individuals with disabilities when they're hired? I know the diversity networks do something like that. I know our veteran network does that for transitioning veterans, but just thinking of that avenue, is anyone using that or thinking about using that?
So yes, we do. I will say I think it's an underserved segment at Wells Fargo Advisors. They definitely have focused on veterans. They've focused on African American women, getting a more diverse level of leaders up across higher organization. I don't see quite as much focus on diverse abilities. So one of my goals as chair is to work on a mentoring program for those that have a passion to want to progress through their careers and be able to provide mentoring from a career development, but also assisting with those that just need mentoring or coaching in order to feel like they're doing their current job really well. So I think it's something that is critically important. I'm a huge advocate of mentoring, but as coming in as the chair of the diverse abilities, I felt like, so you have all these recognizing stretch opportunities for certain segments, but not necessarily from our segment. So I'm hoping that Kathy Martinez coming in really will start providing a little bit more focus from a diverse ability perspective.
Thank you. Anyone else on mentorship programs in their organizations?
I'm a facility guy, but I'll say just make sure your organization, if you have resource groups, make sure that's available to everyone and that you advertise that so that they don't have to go looking for it, so they just can automatically know there are resource groups, and that's a great way to be mentored and be part of already be included right when you come on board. So.
Thank you. I think we probably have time for one more audience question. In front.
Dale, this question is for you since I live in your community. Do you have the ability to impact any non-Clayton owned office buildings? So the office buildings that have been there since the 40s and 50s, that are, I'm certain that they think that they meet minimum requirements, but do you have any way of impacting it? Because I've had a number of challenges in City and Clayton office buildings. The second question is, as someone who's in a wheelchair, the new parking meter system is great because you don't have to have change. However, the location is always awkward. So I have to park at one spot, wheelchair up to the location, pay for it, and then go to where I'm going. Is there some in California, if you put your handicap sticker up, you don't have to pay the meter. So I mean, it's something to think about. I know most of the government officials that are looking at dollars wouldn't appreciate that. But I think it's something to consider. And then the curb cuts in Clayton are way better than in the city, but there's still a number that are low. So if you're in a wheelchair and it's raining or it's slushy or snowy, it's hard to get through where the curb cut is. So I offer that as, you know, an advocate for our city and for all people that have to deal with that.
To your first question, my department doesn't specifically, but other departments that deal with building permits and remodeling from a building and fire code could address some of those, and in some cases require more access than they currently have. With regards to the parking meters, I know what you're saying. We recently put in some of the coin-operated ones so they would be closer to a couple of the handicap spots. We're also looking at some new technology that we hope may be able to allow people to pay for their space from their auto, and with that comes expense. But we're looking at some of those for the future there. And with regards to ramps, as we're addressing primarily the arterial roadways first, because they carry the most traffic and have the most pedestrians, we're trying to leverage not only bond issue money, but federal funds in some cases to try and go in and work on those. And every one of those projects, we try and bring all those ramps up to standards, and not just what you might think of, but we really educated ourselves on all the different dimensions of a ramp and how it should be put into place.
Would you be interested in collaboration, Andy? I'd love to participate in that.
Certainly, if you have a card or something, I'd be happy to get that later.
Thank you, Dale, and certainly lots of other municipalities in the area can learn from some of the moves that the City of Clayton has made, so it's much appreciated. Before I surrender the microphone back to Christy to wrap us up for today, I just want to acknowledge all of her effort in running the Accessible STL program, creating this event for us here today. Her, with the support of her team manager, Kim Lackey, and all of her colleagues in the Public Policy and Advocacy Department at Paraquad, work tirelessly every day to ensure that our city and our region is a leader in accessibility. St. Louis has a long, rich history of being a leader, and we're continuing that legacy on today with things like the Accessible STL program. So we're very honored you could be here today, and Paraquad is very honored to have Christy Herzig, our accessibility expert, working with us with the Accessible STL program. So thank you, Christy, and with that, I'll hand it back over to you to wrap us up.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you to our panelists. That was a great discussion. Thank you. Yes. So I have, the Public Policy Department is going to laugh when I say this. I have a lot of different sayings that I have either coined over the years or have become to develop as we were developing the Accessible STL program. And as I was listening to our panelists today, one of them came to mind. I like to say that you can't have a housewarming party if your house isn't ready. And everything they were saying today, when you're talking about creating an inclusive culture for people with disabilities, is exactly that. Whether it's accessibility, whether it's training, whatever it happens to be, you really want to be, your staff to be as prepared as possible to deal with or to handle whatever comes. So just wanted to throw that out there. So if you recall, at the beginning of this program, I said that these 6 organizations have something in common. They actually have 2 things in common. Does anybody have any guesses on what that might be? Yes. Commitment. That's good. Anybody else? Okay.
All won an Accessible St. Louis award.
You may have got me. Well, the first is that they are all working, they are all committed, I'm going to use your word, they are committed to creating an inclusive culture for people with disabilities. And secondly, yes, every single one of them I have worked with in one way or another through the AccessibleSTL program, and I have been very, very privileged to work with all of them and to continue working with all of these organizations. A couple of reminders as we wrap up. Please remember to fill out your evaluations and leave them on the table for us to pick up. Also, there are Paraquad mugs and notepads on your tables. Please feel free to take those as a compliment from us and a thank you for attending today. The last thing, the AccessibleSTL. There is, in those folders, there is a one-pager on the AccessibleSTL program. So it gives you a little bit more information about what we're doing. If you're interested in that program, you can either go to paraquad.org to find out some other information, but you also have my business card in your folder, so please feel free to use that. On behalf of our panelists, Kathy and Amy and myself, thank you all very much for being here, and panelists, thank you very much. Everybody have a great day.